What's up, faithful? You're listening to another depressing episode of the 49ers Web Zone No Huddle podcast, a part of the Odyssey Network. I'm Brian Rennick. He's Al Sacco. The 49ers are 5-5. They blew another fourth quarter lead to a division rival in the Seattle Seahawks at home. This is a dark day for 49ers fans. Things don't feel very good, Al. In fact, as we talked a little bit before we started, this feels a little bit like today is a post-mortem on the 2024 season, even though there are still 7 games remaining. I don't know about you, but I watched Geno Smith trot into the touchdown, and I just kind of chuckled, and then that was it. Like, I wasn't mad. I wasn't like, I don't know. I feel like unaffected by this team now. And I think that Super Bowl loss broke me a little bit. And I think it broke a lot of fans. And we've talked about that as well.
Yeah.
But this team is just wildly mediocre, which is perfect because their record is 5-5.
This team is the first team since 2000 to lose 3 division games when leading by 4 or more points in the fourth quarter. That tells you everything you need to know. And I agree with you when you talked about when Geno ran in there. Yeah, it was like a sense of this kind of feels right because this is who this team has been.
Yep.
And when I say that, and you brought up fans being from the Super Bowl being broken, 49er fans have been through a lot. And when you say that in general for the 49er franchise, you're like, dude, Montana Young, 5 Super Bowls, get over yourself. That was 30 years ago.
30, yeah.
If you're 35, 36 and younger, you don't remember any of that. You didn't see any of that. All you really know, if you're a fan like that, is early in the York era where they were a joke. And then Jim Harbaugh comes in and turns them around, but it was 3 years of pain, the worst losses you can imagine. He leaves. It's completely chaotic again for a few more years. Shanny comes in and turns it around. But then again, what you've had in the Shanahan era, 2019, they're ahead of the game. Nobody expected that. They make the Super Bowl and they have the Super Bowl won. And lo and behold, they blow it. Then they have 2020, which was a fluky year. But then they go on this run where they've started out slow, but they're a really good playoff team. They find ways to win in the playoffs. But again, it's been 3 years in a row of just absolutely heartbreaking defeats. And now you get to the point where it looks like the window is closing a little bit. These guys are getting old. They are not the same team. They're not. They're beat up. They're older. They're injured. And it kind of feels like it's over. And because they didn't finish the job, yeah, it's easy to be burnt out. You could love something and still feel exasperated by it. And I feel like that's where a lot of fans are.
Yeah, one of my favorite follows on Twitter, 49ers Twitter, which, by the way, I also migrated over to Blue Sky this past week. It's a different world over there, but I will say, still a massive meltdown amongst 49er fans after that loss. So things still feel a little similar over there. It's still a shit show in that regard, but Sour Death Sam, who is just a fun follow. He's funny. He has a live stream show that he calls 49ers Public Access, which just does not take itself seriously at all. It's great. But he tweeted out January 22nd, 2023. And I forgot to look back. I imagine that was a playoff game or so. I'm not sure. But he said, just remember, no matter what happens tonight, we're all going to die, and our existence is just a microscopic blip in the eternal vastness of the universe. He quote tweeted that yesterday and just said, taps the sign. And it's like, just a reminder, like, you know what? None of it matters. None of it matters. Don't let these 49ers hurt you, you guys. Don't let them hurt you. Don't let them affect your mental health. Don't let them, make Monday a day where you got to take off because you're so angry. But it's just, again, it is at this point, like you said, it certainly feels like the death knell, the dying gasp of a would-be dynasty, under Kyle Shanahan, with a lot of these players, just like you said, looking old. One of my Twitter mutuals is a local high school football coach, great guy, And Kurt Bankert had posted a clip of Brock Purdy throwing to Juwan Jennings. It was 3rd and 11, and Seattle came with a 5-man zone blitz, and Brock Purdy had to get it out quick. He got it to Jennings. It was like a 4-yard gain, and they punted. But Kurt Bankert, who is a former NFL quarterback, not a ton of stats, but he had a cup of coffee with the 49ers under Kyle Shanahan.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things we've talked about is Brock Purdy's ability to audible, things like that, but also whether or not Brock Purdy can change protections at the line. And he can't. They don't do that. They don't change protections. And what Kurt said was the 49ers offense doesn't adjust protections. They just throw hot, meaning that the answer to any kind of blitz or any protection bust is that there is a hot route, which you immediately throw to. But what he said is other teams know this and can force their hand in critical situations, just like we saw in the Super Bowl last year. It's mind-blowing stuff that a simple flipper would fix, like flip the protection, meaning flip it from the right to the left. I quote tweeted that. I said, this is from a guy who spent time in the system. I said, Shanahan's stubbornness will also be his eventual downfall. He's not the smartest guy in the room anymore, but still operates as if he is. And I genuinely think that's part of the problem. But my mutual, who, like I said, is a high school football coach, said the clip that Bankert used, he said he wasn't forced to throw hot. That's a 5-man zone blitz pressure. He needs to step up in the pocket, right? Which, I mean, there really wasn't room to step up, but also if you watch the play, everyone was covered. Like even Juwan Jennings was covered. And he said he needs to step up in the pocket. And his all-world left tackle needs to keep his eyes up so he's not beat on the blitz, because Williams did get beat on the blitz.
Right.
And I asked him a question about, isn't he basically just saying that if you know that protections aren't going to be changed, you can scheme your blitzer coverage to force Purdy into making throws to the hot read or whatever. And he said it was 3rd and 11. That's just normal 3rd down football in the NFL. The left tackle got whooped. The right tackle got driven back. And this was the key where I was like, God, he's right. None of the wide receivers won on their routes. Kyle's scheme isn't the issue. Stop being in 3rd and long, and the suspect O-line and slow wide receivers won't get exposed. And that was the part where I was like, God, he is right. Like you watch Debo,
what they are.
And you're like, ugh. And then you watch Jennings, and Jennings is great. Jennings is, but Jennings is not fast. And
you can't have 3 Jennings.
Right.
You need somebody with speed.
And it's wild that this offense all of a sudden has no speed whatsoever. And McCaffrey's one of them, right? And you expect that. He's coming off a bilateral Achilles tendonitis. Like you can't expect him to be the McCaffrey of old. And Kyle Shanahan is using him as if he is and game planning as if he is. And that is a huge issue.
It is a huge issue. He had 23 touches in this game. He's had 42 since he came back. Jordan Mason has 3. And Jordan Mason, with those 3 carries, has gained 5 yards, 8 yards, and 5 yards. Jordan Mason has looked fast and good. And I'm not saying play him over McCaffrey. I'm saying mix him in. If you don't want to play if you don't want to take McCaffrey off the field, put them on the field at the same time. Put them both in the backfield. Put McCaffrey in the slot. Do different things, because McCaffrey is not McCaffrey right now. He's not seeing it very well, and he's not in football shape, obviously. He just got on the field 2 weeks ago.
Right.
How many times have we seen it over and over again? Bosa, Williams, they say it. It takes a while to get into football shape. It's going to take him a while. But here's what's scary about McCaffrey. He's 28 years old. He has about 2,000 total touches when you include the playoffs. History tells us that running backs do not get better at this point in their career. They don't get faster. So will he get more into football shape? Yes. But is he going to get faster and more spry? No, he's probably on the decline. How many times have we seen it with running backs? Delvin Cook's always a good example. Delvin Cook was awesome like 2 years ago, and then he just wasn't.
Fell
to
off
the point where he can't even get on a field. Like, look in the snap of his fingers. Ezekiel Elliott was great, and then he just wasn't. You have guys like Derrick Henry. There are exceptions, and maybe McCaffrey will be that. But when he has the tendonitis, shit, man, what do we expect? Right. And you cannot, like you said, you cannot run your offense around him and expect him to be the McCaffrey of old. Just, you haven't played in however long it's been. We're 8 games into the season. You have bilateral whatever the hell it's called, tendonitis in your Achilles.
Mhm.
You're going to Germany for a blood transfusion to get back on the field. Oh, here you go. Just step in and let's run the offense around you with 25 touches. What are you doing? Look, what are you even thinking at that point? And then you mentioned the rest of the team. I tweeted yesterday during the game that they badly miss Brandon Ayuk as a deep threat. And people were like, well, he wasn't doing shit anyway. No, he wasn't. But he's the only guy who can threaten the field deep.
Mm-hmm.
He's the only guy who can go downfield and you have to account for. So even if he wasn't catching the ball, they still have to account for that. Mm-hmm. They have no one that does that right now.
And you saw that. You saw teams accounting for that. You saw teams giving extra attention to Brandon Ayuk, which was opening things underneath to guys like Juwan Jennings when Ayuk was on the field. You're right. His production numbers weren't there, but his effect on the offense absolutely was.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you're looking at what you had on the field yesterday. Juwan Jennings, I don't know where they'd be without him. He's been phenomenal.
God, I love that guy.
I love it. How do you not? He's been the best offensive player this year. But
yeah, by a long shot.
You can't have three guys like that. And you don't have Kittle, Kittle's probably been their team MVP. Actually, I take that back. But you don't have Kittle. You don't have Ayuk. So you need other guys to step up. Pearsall was invisible yesterday. And Deebo Samuel, talk about old and slow. What did he have? 4 catches for 22 yards? I don't know if the last ball to him where he pitched it counts as a reception or not, but he did nothing. And you're giving him, let's give it to him on a sweep. It's not working, man. It hasn't worked in like 2 years. So they don't have guys to get open, and Purdy hasn't been perfect, and we'll get into that. But they don't have the weapons. They're not a very good team. They're just not. Yeah. They're not the Avengers anymore. The Avengers are old and slow.
Yeah, Deebo Samuel had 21 scrimmage yards on 7 targets and 1 handoff.
I mean, 21.
21. Juwan
Jennings, game where they needed him,
and
badly.
Yeah, he had 7 targets. He caught 4 of them, and he had 22 yards. Meanwhile, Juwan Jennings, 11 targets, 10 receptions, 91 yards, and a touchdown. And here, like Brock Purdy, 21 of 28, 159 yards. 159 yards. This is a team that you played, 4 weeks ago? Was it 4 weeks ago? And absolutely stumped.
Right around there.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 4 weeks ago. Absolutely stomped a mud hole in them. And then you come back in this game, and because Christian McCaffrey is back, your offense just grinds to a halt. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. It's not like Seattle got back world beaters that weren't there against the 49ers the first time. They didn't get an influx of talent that came off of injury or anything like that. So again, it just doesn't, Brock Purdy in that first game was 18 of 28 for 255 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Isaac Guerrero had 10 rushing attempts for 99 yards. Jordan Mason, 9 rushing attempts for 73 yards, right? Like they absolutely obliterated this Seahawks team. And the only difference in this game was that George Kittle was out, but Christian McCaffrey was back. And you put up that kind of performance? Yeah. Holy shit. What?
And Purdy, so he's been up and down this year, and we love Purdy. If you listen to the show, we know that we're Purdy guys, but he's had a completion percentage of under 56% in 3 of his last 7 starts. He's done that just twice in his previous 24 starts. He has a rating of 100 plus in 5 starts this year, and I think 114 plus in 4 of those 5. But then 89.7 or under in the other 5. So he's been all over the place this year, and he's a young quarterback who doesn't have the weapons that he has in the past around him. Now people are going to say, well, wait, he needs all these weapons. Go look at what CJ Stroud has done without Nico Collins. The amount of games he's struggled without his weapons. Now Stephon Diggs is hurt. You still need weapons, and Purdy's played really well at times, and he hasn't at times. And it seems there's play after play after play, and unless you really are grinding the film and knowing what the play is, where Purdy drops back and he's scrambling all over the place and he's running because 1, he doesn't see it, or 2, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
I'm not designing the plays. I maybe I can't answer that, but there's something wrong. And he's a huge weapon with his legs. That's great. But there's a disconnect in the passing game. Guys, it doesn't look like guys are open, and he is sailing some passes, and his interception I thought was inexcusable. He was taking what the defense gave him earlier in the game, I thought, and okay, he's dinking and dunking. We're going down the field. We're going to be fine. And then he just forces an interception. And he is a young quarterback. That's going to happen at times, but that's the kind of stuff that he's got to cut out. But there's a giant disconnect with this offense. It's not just Brock Purdy. It's not just the slow receivers. It's also the offensive line. It's also Kyle Shanahan, because they're undisciplined. They had 7 offensive penalties in this game. 7 offensive penalties. They can't get out of their own way. The play calling at times, you're like, what are you doing? The notion that they've gone to McCaffrey and take Mason completely out of it. And I didn't expect Mason to have 15 carries, but 7?
Right.
Especially when you're working McCaffrey back. And if he's pounding the ball like he was yesterday for only 2 carries, feed him. Just keep giving him the ball. If he's getting 5, 6, 7 yards a pop. So again, it's when people get frustrated with Kyle Shanahan, I feel like it's because he's so stubborn and so set in his ways. Just feels like that's kind of what's going on right now. He has to adjust. He has to get creative. This offense has to change, because with going to Green Bay and going to the Bills after that, you're lucky if you're 6-6, and Detroit's going to kick your ass. So if you play awesome, you're 10-7 at best. And there's no way, looking at this team, I think they're going to be 10-7 right now. Not the way that they're playing at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Green Bay is playing all that great, to be fair. Their offense isn't as good as I anticipated.
Yeah, and Love is hurt.
Jordan Love is Love is not playing as well as we anticipated, but like you said, he is playing through some injuries. But that is a team that, despite that, still finds a way to win. And that's what we used to see with this 49ers team. This 49ers team isn't finding a way to win. You know, I brought up to you before we started, I said I looked up the 49ers defensive and offensive rankings, right? Just trying to figure out, like, okay, based in years past, right? Like, what are we used to seeing from this offense, from this defense? You know, obviously their rankings are probably going to be worse than we're used to seeing. And the reality is that it's not. And so there's this disconnect that I don't know how to bridge the two, because, you know, if we look at, let's just say, the defensive side, which is what people want to complain about, right? Because once again, a fourth quarter defensive collapse. You know, one damning statistic is that the 49ers are second in the NFL in points given up in the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. They've given up 29 points. I think after last Sunday, I believe it's up to 29. If not, it's more than that. And I think they may lead the league now. But when you look at just the raw statistics, right? Yards given up, they're 5th. Yards per play, they're 7th. Passing yards, they're 7th. Passing net yards per attempt, they're 7th. Passing touchdowns, they're 9th. Rush yards, they're 7th. Rush yards per attempt, 11th. This one hurts a little bit. Rushing touchdowns, they're 25th. They've given up 13. But their turnover percentage is 7th at 14.8. And their turnovers that they've generated is 9th at 16. First is Minnesota with 21. And then points per game is 15th at 22.2. So again, you look at those and you go, that's not awful, right? Like, the points per game is middle of the road, but we said that, right? If this defense can just be middle of the road, this offense should be able to carry this team.
Yeah.
And it's not. And then you look at their offensive rankings. Yards, they're 3rd. Yards per play, they're 2nd. Passing yards, they're 5th. Passing net yards per attempt, they're 3rd. Passing touchdowns, again, here's a disconnect. Passing touchdowns, 14th, because they only have 13 of them. Interceptions, they are 14th with 8. Number 1 being the Chargers with 1. Justin Herbert only has 1 interception. Rush yards, they're 7th. Rush yards per attempt, they're tied for 3rd at 5.0. Rushing touchdowns, again, the disconnect, they're 12th. They have 10. They're tied with the Jaguars, Chargers, and Texans. Their turnover percentage is 17th at 10.8, and their turnovers are 14th. Again, you don't want to be 1. 1 is the highest. So again, middle of the road in turnover percentage and turnovers. Points per game, they're 8th at 25, which is tied with Green Bay. So they are scoring more points than they are giving up. They are scoring 25 per game. They're averaging giving up 22 per game. That's not a recipe for 5-5. It's just not. And so then you have to look at, well, what can you explain? Special teams. coaching,
Mhm.
discipline, like all of that falls on the
Right.
coaching staff.
Third down
It doesn't
conversions,
fall on the
things like that.
players. It's not execution. It's not. They are executing. If they weren't, they wouldn't have rankings like that. It's got to fall on coaching. At some point, you got to point the finger at yourself and go, all right, I'm Kyle Shanahan. I'm the head coach of this team. I've got to be better. And I just don't know that he has that in him.
He's had a bad season. He has not had a good season. And regardless of what you think Kyle Shanahan, which is kind of inarguable right now, is that he's not great at the end of games. And you've seen it this year over and over and over again. It's killed him in, 2 Super Bowls with the 49ers. They blame him for the Atlanta one, but Dan Quinn's got to get blamed there too. But the end of games, he's really struggled, and he's not having a good season. Here's the other thing with Shanahan and even Lynch right now. If you're the Yorks, they had to shell out a lot of money to players who were already under contract. Mm-hmm. Trent Williams, he didn't, and they clearly, it wasn't an easy contract negotiation with him. It wasn't an easy decision because it took the whole freaking training camp and all, preseason to get him in. So it's not like they were like, yeah, we'll figure this out. We'll throw some extra money at you. It was a process and maybe something the Yorks had to go above what they wanted to. Brandon Ayuk, it took the whole preseason, training camp, everything. They definitely went over what they wanted to pay him. He wasn't great when he was here, and now we're not even going to see him for maybe until middle of next season. Mm-hmm. And even McCaffrey, that was a faster process. They got it done quickly, but you paid money to an older running back who clearly had some injury issues. So the Yorks have shelled out tens of millions of dollars to run it back with a team that maybe you had to start thinking of some new faces in there because they're getting older. So again, and I don't think anybody's on the hot seat right now, but as they move into this next window in the next couple of years, they're going to have to perform. They're still going to have to be near the top of the NFC. If they go into the doldrums a little bit, shelling all that money, then in a year or two, then you are on the hot seat because you're 10 years into this. That's when things, even for really successful coaches, sometimes like 10 years, you're just like, all right, everybody's heard all my spiels. Like it just is what it is. We've seen it happen to a number of different coaches at a number of different stops. So for that, we'll see. We'll have to see how things go. But you mentioned the defense. They gave up 3.3 yards per play up until Nick Bosa went out of that game. And then it went to 6.1. And you mentioned the stats. And I never look at them and think, oh, they look really good. But they're a middle of the road defense. Maybe a pretty good defense, maybe. But we've seen over and over again at the end of games, they can't close. And you gave the stats. They're not able to close. Another issue with this defense is they're really top heavy, which you saw with Bosa going out. So if you don't have Warner, if you don't have Bosa, I expect a huge drop off a cliff. We saw that in this game where 2 straight scoring drives, and we'll see if Bosa's out for an extended period of time, and he might be.
He will be. I don't even mind. I think it's will.
I think things could get a little bit dicey.
Yeah. You talk about not being able to close. Josh Dubow of the AP tweeted this out yesterday. 125 coaches have had 40 plus regular season games decided by 7 points or fewer. 49ers coach Kyle Shanahan's 396 win percentage in those games ranks 118th.
Out of how many?
125.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So
it's a problem. It's a problem. It's a real problem. It's a real problem.
He could be as you could love Kyle as much as you want to and point to his success. He's done all those things. He's made it to Super Bowls. He's made NFC Championship games. He's won divisions, but he hasn't been able to get over the hump and get to the mountaintop because of the issue you just said. And now it's maybe going to take them out of the playoffs this year because this is 4 games they've blown.
Yeah,
they haven't beat anybody with
in
a
the division.
Record, Ryan. We're saying we have 1 and 3 in the division. We're saying, the Packers aren't as good as their record. The Niners haven't beaten anyone with a winning record. They beat Seattle, who was 1 and 4 in their last 5 going into this game. They beat a terrible Patriots team. They beat a terrible Jets team. They barely beat a Bucs team that is decimated by injuries.
A reeling Bucs team, yeah.
And they beat a Cowboys team that is bad and also decimated by injuries. They haven't beat the 2 teams they played that were good, Kansas City and Minnesota. They got dog walked a little bit. Yeah. So what is this team? They're not a good team right now.
They're not good. That's the bottom line is they're not good. And again, everyone talked about the Super Bowl hangover. And it seems to be pretty real. there are very few teams that you could point to that came back the next season and had similar success or more, right? The most recent one being the Kansas City Chiefs after losing to the Eagles, right? Came back and
Patriots have done it.
I mean, or not losing to the Eagles, losing to the Bucks, and then came back and beat the Eagles. But yeah, it's just tough, and it certainly seems like, again, you touched on it a lot going into the season. Just so many extended seasons for so many years is taking its toll on a team that is old in places where you would like to see a little bit more youth. And we're talking left tackle, we're talking wide receiver, but that's the other thing. Like, you brought it up earlier, right? The 49ers don't have anyone to challenge the deep parts of the field. Jacob Cowing is just sitting on the bench, just playing with himself, right? Like, why can't he see the field? I don't understand. And again, we go back to the stubbornness of Kyle Shanahan. Like, you've drafted 2 wide receivers. You drafted 2 of them this draft when you had needs elsewhere.
Right.
Like, why is Jacob Cowing not seeing the field? Why is Ricky Pearsall have, I believe, 0 targets or 1 target? I think he had 1 target. I mean, it just, so Jeff Walliser put in the chat earlier, everything on offense looks hard. It feels like these defenses know what's coming before the 49ers even break the huddle. It all looks stale. And I agree. It looks stale. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look like, everyone calls Kyle Shanahan an offensive genius. And I'm not saying that he hasn't been in the past, but it certainly seems like the league has caught up to him. And even his tree, right? You look at Mike McDaniel in Miami, that offense doesn't look good. No. You look at Houston, that offense isn't looking very good either. You look at New Orleans, there have been games where it's looked good, including yesterday, but for the most part, that offense has struggled quite a bit. Like, it just seems like teams know how to defend this offense now, which means that you're going to have to change things up. And it seems like he refuses to do so. He just refuses to do it.
Yeah, the Cowing thing is maddening because even if he's on the field for, I don't know, 4 snaps and you're just like, run a go route, right? Just take the top off the defense, just that threat is going to be there. Yeah. And throw one up to him one game. Make the defense think a little bit. It's chess, right? Kyle even talks about they'll run a play in the first quarter to set themselves up for the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. Run plays like that with Cowing. You have to do something to spread the field, or what you're seeing is going to keep happening, where they're just going to load the box and you're going to say, oh, why is Purdy holding the ball? Why is this a 4-yard completion? Why is this a 5-yard completion? How many times have we seen in the past with this team where Purdy throws the ball and he just there's nobody around the guy and he's running for the next 3 miles, just untouched? Yeah. Why don't we hardly seen that at all this year at all? And you look at the touchdown passes, you mentioned Purdy has 13. So last season, they had 7 players catch a touchdown pass, and they had 4 with 6 or more. This year, 4 players have caught a touchdown pass. This is the touchdown reception numbers. Kittle has 7, all of which in the red zone. Jennings has 4, 3 of which are in the red zone. Deebo has 1, Pearsall has 1. They're both outside of the red zone. So after 15 plays last season of 20-plus yard touchdowns, they have 3 this year. And just other than 2 players, you have 1 guy with 1 touchdown. Deebo Samuel having 1 touchdown 10 games into the season. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like, what are we doing? And I can't say enough. If I see him on a sweep and lose a yard one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to lose my mind. And when you have in the backfield too, like, stop handing again. You have good running backs. Mason and Garendo have both done a good job. Hand them the ball. It's okay to not give McCaffrey the ball 25 times right now. Those guys have made big plays for the Niners.
And it feels like malpractice to give Christian McCaffrey 25 touches right now.
It is. Like you said, you're playing with fire. And
I like, what are you telling me, that Christian McCaffrey refuses to come off the field? You're the head coach. Like, if he's refusing to come off the field, that's a you problem, right? You you are the head coach. You make those decisions. But to just devise game plans like Christian McCaffrey is A, 100%, and then B, in football shape, and C, is not 28 years old and already having 2,000 touches. We talked about limiting his touches before the season started when we thought we didn't realize he was going to miss as many games as he did. Look, you need to limit his touches because you want him fresh for the playoffs. Now he's coming off this Achilles injury, and in the 2 games he's got, I think, close to 50 touches. Like it just, like it just, there are certain things that he does that just don't compute and don't make sense. And I've said this before, Kyle Shanahan has forgotten more about football than I will probably ever know. But that doesn't mean.
I'm gonna sorry, not to interrupt, Brian. I'm gonna get somebody in the chat who's doing the Grant clone thing because we're being negative. And he said, they run sweeps to set the move linebackers, right? Great. So now you can end up in 2nd and 11, in 3rd and 9, and in these 3rd and longs constantly and not convert like what they're doing. Being negative is not being a Grant Cohn clone when the team is not playing well. Like, enough with that. If you listen to this show, we are very positive with this team. We are very truthful with what we think. We don't just make up shit to be controversial. Like, things aren't going well right now. And CMC came off the field. CMC has 42 touches in 2 games coming off his double Achilles injury. 42 touches. Give me a break with that. Give me a break with the Grant Cohn clone. And I don't have anything against Grant. I like Grant. Grant's fine. Yeah. But come on.
Deebo Samuel
I hate that. I hate when we're critical on the show, or just as fans, like when you're frustrated, vent. We have a venue to vent. A lot of did a tweet yesterday. It had about this McCaffrey thing getting too many touches. 1,500 likes, like 100 people responded because people want to talk about this. Mm-hmm. People want to say I'm frustrated. People want to go through this. So, like, come on, you can disagree. It's fine, but this is part of the conversation. Don't start with you guys are negative. You don't know what you're talking about. Give me a break. It's part of being a fan. This is part of having a show. It's part of talking in social media or whatever it is. You vent with other fans. You talk about what you think. Like, give me a break with that stuff.
Deebo Samuel has 27 rush attempts for 79 yards this season. That's a 2.9 yard per attempt average. That means it's not working. Regardless of if it worked in the past, regardless of what you are attempting to do, it's not working. And you've seen it not work all season. His career average is 5.8 yards per attempt, which means it's half. It is half what it's been his entire career. It's not working. Stop doing it. Stop spamming it. Take it out. Stop doing it. When things don't work, you change things up. I don't understand. Like, there's no defending that, right? If Christian McCaffrey was averaging 2.9 yards per attempt, is he going to feed him 25 times a game? No, he's not. If Jordan Mason was averaging 2.9 yards, we'd probably see Kyle Shanahan fight him on the sideline, right? So again, it's not being negative. It's not being negative for the sake of being, it's just being critical of things that you see. And if you don't see that, if you think that those plays are still good and those plays are still beneficial for the offense, I don't know what to tell you, because like I said, they're not. And it's obvious there. 2.9 yards per attempt on his rushing attempts is not effective. It's not doing anything.
Yeah, it's been frustrating. It's been frustrating. I still think that they have, even with the injuries, even with the age, they still have the players to get to 10 wins. They're in get in the playoffs. Then anything can happen. But the way it's going right now, I find it really hard to believe that they're going to make the playoffs. And we said before the season, unless disaster strikes, and I don't want to say it's disaster. They've had definitely had some rough patches, but I mean, like, you lose Bosa for the season, you lose Purdy for the season, that sort of thing. Them not making the playoffs would be pretty disastrous, I guess, for lack of another term. And that's kind of where they're headed right now. So if that happens, where do you go from here? You can't run it back, because you're just going to be a year older next year. You're not going to have Ayuk for part of the season next year. McCaffrey is going to be 29. Kittle, as great as he's been, is going to be 32. Debo looks slow now. What's he going to look like with another year under his belt? And I don't even think they can move on from Debo's contract after the restructure. I don't look at his dead money. I'm not sure if
they can. It just doesn't help them as much as it would have. In the past, it would have given them a good chunk of cap space. Now they can move on from Debo, and it would cost them, or they would gain $1 million extra in cap space versus if they just keep him. So theoretically, yes, they can, right?
Mhm.
But the only way it makes sense is if you are able to trade him to somebody for some value. Now, based on how his season has gone, I don't know what that would look like. It's going to be less than it was last offseason. But yeah, I mean, I think the only way that Debo is gone is if he gets traded, because again, they could cut him and they get $1 million in cap space. But again, I just don't see the reason why you would do that. So outside of a trade, I think he's on this team because of that restructure. So again,
And,
that's
and
frustrating.
they're gonna have to, like, there's so many places they need to address next season. They need a center. They need a better right tackle as well. I mean, can we stop? Can we stop with that? They're gonna need another linebacker if Greenlaw doesn't come back. Linebacker's been an issue this year, other than Warner. And if Greenlaw doesn't come back next year, you got to get another one, because Winters is fast, but he plays like a young player. You know, he can be undisciplined. He makes mistakes. If you don't have Ward next season, again, we like what we've seen with Renardo Green, but where do you go there? Yadam's only on a 1-year deal. You probably get another corner. You still have 2 young safeties. You don't totally know about the defensive line. Needs a lot of help.
Yeah.
Leonard Floyd is 32 years old. You're going to need more. Javon Hargrave may not be on the team next year. You're going to need help there. The receivers look old and slow. If you just drafted 2 wide receivers, okay, if Cowing isn't in your plans, maybe he will be next year. If he isn't in your plans and Ayuk's not coming back until halfway through the season, he's coming off a major knee injury. It's not like he's going to come back again and be like, usually takes a little while. You need
look
help
at Odell Beckham Jr.
He's never the same. Yeah.
Never the same.
You need help there as well. I like what they have with Garendo and Mason at running back. Again, I think that they did a good job. And then there's the Purdy question, who I think is good enough, but you can't throw him out there and expect him to be Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, because he's not. He's not Lamar. He's not those guys. I think he's good. I think he can be in, a tier below or whatever, but he's not elite. So you do have to have guys around him, unless you have one of those 5 guys, and there's really only like 5 or so of them. Maybe I'm forgetting 1 or 2 people, but you need good players around your quarterback. Look at the situation the Cowboys are in. Like, Dak's an upper tier quarterback. He is, but he has major flaws. He can't win big games. You're gonna win games with him, but you're probably never going to win a championship with him unless you have like great players around him. And when you're playing somebody like that much money, that's tough to do. It's part of why the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl every year, right? When you get that guy, it just kind of is what it is. You're going to dominate, and if you don't have it, you got to hope you go on a heater one year, like a Flacco or a Nick Foles or Joe Burrow or somebody like that.
And honestly, like that is really to me a very upper level kind of thought experiment and kind of galaxy braining things. But the question becomes, if you don't, you just said it, right? Unless you get a guy that's on a heater or whatever, right? You look at, just look at the last 20 Super Bowls, and it's just littered with Hall of Famers at the position, right? That's who wins the Super Bowl. You've got a Hall of Famer, an all-timer at the position. Every once in a while, a non-Hall of Famer sneaks in. Again, you could argue, is Eli Manning a Hall of Famer or not, right? He's got 2 Super Bowl victories over Tom Brady. Like, that's impressive.
Yeah, he's a borderline Hall of Famer anyway.
Borderline, right? But, every once in a while, like you said, you get a Nick Foles. Every once in a while, like you said, you get a Joe Flacco.
Matt Ryan has a great year or something like that. Yeah.
But didn't win the Super Bowl.
Right.
So then the question becomes, if you don't think that Brock Purdy is one of those guys, do you pay him like he's one of those guys? That's a tough question, because I don't know about you, but I've already seen this regime mortgage the future to pick a quarterback, and it was an abject disaster. So if you don't pay Brock Purdy, do you have faith that they can get a guy? And again, part of why they did that was because they came off a season in 2020 where they had a ton of injuries, and they had a mid round pick that they were able to then jump up, granted at a high cost, to get into position to draft a quarterback. I don't anticipate this team being under 500. So best case scenario, you're in the early to mid 20s. You're not getting a quarterback there. So then do you, again, try and mortgage the future to get up? Is there a quarterback? You know what I mean? Like, it's such a, do they make him play out the final year of his contract and be like, look, like we're not convinced. Now, if you're Brock Purdy, you go, well, then I'm not playing. Like, I'm not going to play at $900,000 and risk a knee injury that keeps me from becoming a free agent and cashing in. Right. Like, there's all these different scenarios, but it is an interesting thought experiment to say, if you don't feel like a quarterback that has performed really well, but isn't elite, do you pay him like he's elite? Because you can't surround him with the type of talent that a quarterback of that ilk needs to win a Super Bowl, right? Dak Prescott's a perfect example. Unless you're Patrick Mahomes, unless you're Josh Allen, unless you're Lamar Jackson, right? Like, these are guys that can carry a team on their back to victories, right? Unless you're Lamar Jackson and you're playing the Steelers, then you can't. It is what it is. But I'm just saying it is. I've never been one to say that the 49ers should move on from Brock. I don't think they should move on from Brock, but I also don't know that $60 million a year for Brock Purdy is the right financial decision. And maybe as a organization and as a player, they come together and they go, look, here's what we think. Here's the market. We know what the market is. We need you to understand we can't pay you market value because we don't think that, we can compete if we're paying you that. Are you willing to take less?
At some point, it's got to flip.
I don't know.
But at some point, a team is going to do that, and maybe the Niners will be that team. Because look at the Trevor Lawrence deal, look at the Dak deal. So they're not good deals because these are not those type of quarterbacks. So now you're hamstrung. What if the Jaguars won 3 of their last 18 games or something ridiculous like that?
No one is saying that he's an issue. We're not talking about Brock Purdy being an issue. We're not saying that. That's not what we're arguing.
What they might do is maybe they do say, I don't want to say use the Daniel Jones contract or like the Geno Smith contract, but maybe something like that where it's just shorter. Like, hey, like we love you, but again, if we pay you $60 million, you know what I mean? We're going to lose a lot of pieces. Like, what if we do, I don't know, 3 years, 130 or something like that? You're talking like in the mid 40s. Like, is Brock amenable to that? Brock is 24 years old. Brock may be like, all right, I'll sign a 3-year deal for $130 million and be a free agent again when I'm 27. He might do that. Sure, that's a great point. Green Bay and Buffalo will go a long way in evaluating, but that's a great point. The next 2 weeks are huge by Jeff Wolitzer. Green Bay and Buffalo games will say a lot. If he balls out in those games,
heater in the chat today.
He is on a heater today. He's doing a good job. So maybe that's what they do. Maybe it is a shorter term deal where with not as much money, with Purdy knowing that, all right, I'm gonna be 27.
Right.
If I'm going to do what I think I'm going to do, I'll be 27 and have another chance to get a huge contract here. It's possible.
And let's be perfectly honest, betting on yourself, but still getting $45 million a year for 3 years, like,
pretty good deal.
That's a decent bet, right? Like, it's not really, there's not a ton of risk, for Brock in that regard. And I think that's some of the back and forth with like Brandon Ayuk, I think, was a little bit about, the teams typically want to go longer because they get to spread that cap hit out further, right? And it helps the team more. But players want to go shorter so that they can get another opportunity to get into the market. And if wide receivers and players of that ilk want that, then obviously a quarterback who, Brock Purdy for all the, and I don't mean this to say that I think it's an act or anything, but for the amount of humility that guy has, that guy also has a lot of confidence in himself. He has to,
Yeah.
right? You
Yep.
have to in order to play that position. And so that's a good point. I never even thought of that. I never even thought of about maybe the middle ground is not a 5-year contract, but annual average value being low, but rather a short-term contract that is, somewhere in between 45, maybe 50, whatever. And it still gives you the opportunity to cut bait if necessary, if it's not working out, whatever the case may be. That's a good point. I never even thought of that.
Yeah. So, we'll see. There's 7 more games here to see if they can turn it around and see what else they can do. In Green Bay and Buffalo, we're gonna find out. Going to Green Bay and going to Buffalo, we are definitely gonna find out there. So hey, before we go, so John Chapman does this 49er Rush events. He's doing one in Buffalo. I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna show up, and I got some stuff to give away from Foco. I got a bobblehead to give away on a nice Niners tumbler that we'll give away there. Foco.com. Check them out. And yeah, if you're there, come say hi. Buy me a drink.
Yeah. A beer.
I buy me anything. I don't care. Beer.
Fair enough.
I'm good with it all. So
get out drunk.
Get me drunk because I may need it by that point. So all right, everybody. Thanks for listening to us vent. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you were able to vent along with us, and hopefully things are going to get better here. For Brian, I'm Al.
Later.